I never imagined betrayal would arrive alongside flowers. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. I had plans to meet a client at a downtown restaurant, one of those trendy fusion places that always had the scent of basil and polished wooden air. I arrived early, as I usually do, and stood by the hostess stand scanning the tables out of habit. That's when I spotted her, Rachel. Her hair was curled just right, and she was wearing a white dress. The one I hadn't seen in months, the one that clung to her hips a little too perfectly for a business meeting. She was seated at a small corner table, laughing with a man across from her. He was tall, tan, sporting a typical Wall Street haircut. And in the center of the table was a bouquet of red tulips. Tulips, her favorite, not mine. Definitely not for me. Something inside me snapped. I didn't pause to think, didn't even blink. I simply walked straight toward their table, driven by some uncontrollable force. She didn't notice me at first, not until I stood right at the edge of their little bubble. Her eyes widened, her smile froze mid-laugh. The man looked up, confused. "David," she stammered, her face draining of color. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I looked at her, then at the flowers and back to her before calmly stating, "It's over." Just 3 words. Cold. Final. I turned and walked out, leaving her and that stranger gaping at me, the candle between them flickering, as if it still believed in love. I climbed into my car, slammed the door, and sat there shaking. My heart was racing so fast it felt like it would explode. I stared at the glass walls of the restaurant, wondering if she'd come running after me. She didn't. She stayed inside, probably explaining to him how I was just overreacting, or how things had been complicated for a while. I drove home in a daze, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. What lingered in my mind wasn't the pain. It was her face. The way her expression shifted from shock to calculation. That's what stayed with me. Not guilt, not sorrow, but strategy. She wasn't sorry for getting caught. She was just figuring out how much I knew. When I got home, the house was dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I poured myself a drink, straight bourbon, no ice, and sank into the living room, the soft glow from the kitchen light barely reaching me. My hands trembled as I gripped the glass. The silence around me felt suffocating. This was supposed to be our home, a place full of comfort, trust, and history. But now it felt like a crime scene. Every photo on the wall was a lie. Every memory we shared seemed shattered. How many nights had she told me she was working late or meeting a client? How many times had I sat on this very couch waiting for her while she was in someone else's arms? She came home 3 hours later, the door creaking softly as she entered, trying not to wake me, like I was a sleeping husband she didn't want to disturb. I heard the click of her heels on the hardwood floor, followed by hesitant steps as she turned the corner and saw me sitting there. She froze. "David, I can explain," she said, her voice soft and careful, like she was talking to someone who could snap at any moment. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. The silence between us spoke more than any words could. She moved closer, pleading, "It's not what you think." I let out a bitter laugh. It was hollow, unfamiliar. "You met him with flowers, Rachel. You were wearing white. It's exactly what I think." The argument didn't last long. She cried. I didn't. She blamed everything: stress, distance, work, anything but herself. When I asked how long it had been going on, she didn't answer. That told me everything I needed to know. I told her to leave. She didn't, not immediately. She spent the night in the guest room. The next morning, she texted me from the hallway, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and started doing what she never thought I would. I began digging through every app, email, and backup cloud I could access. I didn't care if it was petty. I needed to know the truth. And what I found, it was more than I'd ever imagined. Photos, messages, hotel reservations, voice memos, even Google Maps history. She hadn't just cheated. She had built an entire secret life behind my back. Trips I thought were business turned out to be weekend getaways. Nights she claimed to be working late were actually dinner reservations under fake names. I didn't confront her again. Not yet. I let her think I was processing it. Healing. I went to work, ate dinner in silence, even smiled a couple of times. She started trying harder, cooking my favorite meals, offering to watch my shows, asking if I wanted to talk. I nodded and told her I needed space. She mistook my quiet for forgiveness. That was her mistake. I wasn't forgiving her. I was documenting her. I created folders, timelines, and backed up every shred of evidence I could find. I remained in my car, watching from the shadows. Rachel thought she had won again, and that was what intrigued me most. How effortlessly cheaters slipped back into their usual routines, as though the consequences were nothing more than a temporary blip in the ongoing symphony of their lies. She was laughing more now, touching me with a kind of familiarity, her eyes shining with the belief that the storm had passed. But it hadn't. I was the storm, silent, patient, tightening the circle around her. Every time she messaged Kyle, I saw it. I still had access to her cloud account. She hadn't figured it out. Or maybe she had, but assumed I was too broken to keep looking. That's the thing about people like her. They mistake silence for surrender, stillness for indifference. Then the moment I'd been waiting for arrived. Sooner than I expected. It wasn't a tip from a friend, but a twist of fate. Lydia, one of Rachel's acquaintances, reached out to me unexpectedly. She said she wasn't comfortable with what she had seen. Rachel had been at a hotel bar with Kyle last weekend, and it certainly wasn't for business. I played ignorant. Are you sure it was her? I asked. Lydia sent me a photo. There was Rachel, her hand on Kyle's knee, a drink in the other hand, wearing the same white dress she'd worn the night I found them together. I thanked Lydia, acting as though it was probably a misunderstanding, and promised I wouldn't mention it. She bought it. I waited 3 days, letting the guilt fester, while Rachel put on her best act, asking if I wanted to get away for the weekend, telling me how much she appreciated my patience. I smiled, nodded, and said it sounded nice. Then that Friday, I told her I was going on a fishing trip with my brother. I packed my things and left by 7 a.m. She kissed me at the door and told me to be safe. I drove around the block and parked a few streets away, waiting. At 9:40 a.m., she left the house, dressed to impress. I followed her at a distance, making sure she couldn't see me. She headed toward the beachside rental district, where Kyle had booked an Airbnb, a charming bungalow with a swing and a wraparound porch. I parked where she couldn't spot me, then waited another 20 minutes before heading toward the house. I didn't knock. I didn't call. I used the spare key I had taken from her keychain months ago. I opened the door quietly and slipped inside. They were in the kitchen, laughing over coffee. Rachel was barefoot, leaning against the counter like she belonged there, while Kyle stood close by, one hand on her waist, the other holding his mug. When Rachel saw me, she didn't scream. It was more of a gasp, one that didn't finish. Kyle looked up, confused and panicked. I didn't speak. I just pulled my phone from my pocket and played a recording. It was her voice. You're the only man who really understands me, Kyle. David is dull. Safe. I need more. Then I played a picture, a still from the security camera. Rachel on top of him, in our bed. She dropped the mug, shattering it, her hands raised in a defensive gesture. She stammered, tried to explain. But I turned to Kyle and said just one thing. Your wife already knows. His face drained of color. What? He asked. But I was already walking out. Rachel called my name, but I didn't stop. I got into my car and drove straight home. By the time she returned that evening, the house was empty. Her clothes were packed in garbage bags on the porch. My wedding ring sat in a bowl by the door, and a letter on the table simply said, "We're done." I didn't answer her calls. I didn't open her emails. I let the silence speak louder than any argument could. Rachel moved in with a friend and then to a hotel. Kyle's wife filed for divorce and took the kids. Rachel tried to reconnect with him, but from what I heard, he shut her out. He had used her as an escape, but once the dust settled, he was done with her too. Now she was alone, adrift, with no one to turn to and no one left to lie to. It didn't end with a loud bang. It ended in a slow, lingering decay. Weeks turned into months. The divorce papers came through, and I received no alimony. I kept the house. She moved back to her hometown in Arizona, attempting to rebuild, but her reputation stuck to her like smoke. Lydia told me that Rachel's new job lasted just 2 weeks before she was let go. No one trusted her. No one believed in second chances for a woman who had shattered a marriage and sold her future for fleeting thrills.